Apologize to anybody, that saw the first half of the original interview. I apologize, have some technical difficulties, but I'm good now and stuff. So, with technology as a host, these are the shenanigans we go through, but that's a whole different episode another time. But this brother right here, he interviewed me like during late March, man. It was a blast, man, so many views, between, like the YouTube, and as well as Instagram. And, me to him detailing my history, what I'm saying, and then educating the public, of the do's and don'ts and stuff like that. And this brother here is Spud Brooklyn. He's an engineer, an A&R, and a creator. I mean, this brother, man, hands on to everything. You know what I'm saying? And I meant to tell you too, man. I felt like I saw you somewhere, man, on TV. Now I would say now about talking, but far as like being behind the scenes of the business, because when you do a lot in your career, say like, wait a minute, that cat got a familiar face, what I'm saying? And
It's,
stuff,
that's what it's
you know.
possible. I don't know. It's possible. It's possible, man. But
Yeah.
I
And
try to
stuff.
keep my hands in everything.
Yeah, but I definitely want to give you your flowers, man, because you gave my flowers on your show. And big shouts to Miss V, Miss V Vintage in the house.
Shout out to
And
V.
say thank you, man, for man, like you did an amazing job. I don't have people that interview me, that was good. It was only for like 30 minutes though, but man, for you, man, to talk over an hour, man, because 29 years, man, I mean, I got like a bunch of stuff, man. So
I could imagine,
you know,
man. I could
yeah,
imagine.
30 minutes ain't gonna do it, man. But man, yeah, so we're gonna get right to it. Now, like growing up as a kid, what was your life like, growing up as a child?
Music. As when I was growing up, I didn't realize how instrumental music was. You know what I'm saying? I really didn't. My family comes from a Jamaican background, so my father would listen to like Bob Marley, and then he was listening to the Temptations. My mother's listening to the Beach Boys and Phil Collins. My sister's listening to Kenny G and Shabba Ranks, and then my brothers are listening to straight hip hop. So I didn't even understand genre growing up. I just thought music was a mood because I knew if certain music was being played, I knew the type of temperature I was around. If my brother was mad
Wow.
or my mother was happy. So music was always a mood for me. So it was just genuinely in sync that music would be something that I got into. I didn't even realize like the separation of like it being music. It was just life. Vibrations and sound was just life. So when I first saw Rakim on Follow the Leader
Oh man.
on the side of the car with the Tommy gun in the video. I remember my mind was blown away because that was the first time I saw something like that
Yeah.
resonated to some a image or a feel that I could see, and that's when like the love for like that's when music was just like, oh yeah, there's music, but then there's this other thing, hip hop that really
Yeah.
resonates with me. And that's when I just dived into music creating. I wanted my ideas and thoughts on paper.
Yeah, because oh man, especially like man, like the mid late 80s and the early 90s, man, to see an artist, man, that brought something, man, to television and stuff, man, was like mind blowing, man. Say Rakim, man. I mean, the thought provoking lyrics he had, man.
Yes.
Yeah, LL Cool J, he had Kumo D, the
Yeah.
Boogie Down Bronx Productions.
Yes,
I mean,
indeed.
the whole East Coast thing, man, was like dominating, man, just to see that at that time, Heavy D, the boys. The good thing back in those days, everybody had the old style.
Yes. Yes,
It
indeed.
might be similar to a certain storytelling because, of course, in the 80s, drugs were just like rapid, what I'm saying? In those days, black people becoming, homeless and stuff like that, but just to, see that, then it gave you a mind frame, but like, you know what? I want to pursue this, man. I think I got something here, but I feel like this is my calling.
Straight up. And the calling and the feel, like how it made you feel, you know what I mean? Especially back then
Yeah.
and now as well, but that fresh essence of that expression, man, it set the tone for everything that I I do. I crack jokes with the youngins like, yo, I walk and breathe hip hop. Like everything from, I said, I got rapper hands. When I'm always talking, I'm like, I got rapper hands.
Yeah.
Like everything about me just stems from like those moments really made an impact through me throughout my whole journey.
Wow. Yeah, because back then, we had, Rap City, it's like the birds of that. Then we had Yo TV Raps, and back then, it was like, for rappers, they had the opportunity because, you couldn't be on those videos so unless you was like a kid to play type, what I'm
Yeah.
saying, type of artist, so the kind of like the Killy friendly type of thing, so Rap City, Yo TV Raps was like, like you would go to boost your album sales, then you might see rap on Showtime Apollo, back in those days and stuff
Yeah.
where hip hop was slowly creeping while R&B was still, dominating stuff,
Thriving. Yes, most definite.
So when you was a kid, so like what was your kind of like your adopted style, during that time and stuff, as far as we came to hip hop.
So the streets was very, especially at the time when I was listening and dabbling into the hip hop in the 80s, the early 80s or mid 80s to the late 90s. The streets really spoke. So even like I'm talking about the crime and the drug dealing, this all painted a picture of the reality, because as a kid you don't really realize how big the world is, right? So
Yeah.
my block is the world, Brooklyn is the world, and then Manhattan. I don't think outside of that as a kid. So a lot of that was influenced in my actions, and then seeing hip hop being like a mirror of what I saw when I walked out my door. It was like every day was a hip hop video for me. Like every time I
Right.
walked out my house, it was a hip hop video for me. So when I started to write, I would just detail what I saw, because that's what I didn't even know. I didn't even know, like at the time, how some artists might be fabricating or some of it might not be true. To me, it was real. I saw it. I see it looks real. So everything in my life, I started to just detail and make that word rhyme to tell a story of what I saw, and that was kind of like my first taste of it, of being an artist, not even knowing that's what I wanted to be. I found my way of
Yeah.
talking, I found my way to speak, and it spoke to me.
Yeah. It's crazy though, because like just look at, edit those days, because every video man was like, as far as New York was like somewhere like in a factory, somewhere like in a neighborhood and stuff, or like in a club. And and I can only imagine back in those days, it wasn't really a whole lot of areas to go to. They just sound like a studio. Wasn't really no background, just like a white background. That's about it. Or they go to like some building like it was a party, whatever. That was kind of like, and back then I could imagine, because the videos was cheap to pay, compared
Yeah,
to by the time the 90s came in, that was a whole different lane and stuff.
yeah, especially like you were saying, like the backdrops. It was just the true to life eras. Like, yo, let's go to this block, or let's go into this building, let's go into this place. And growing up, being able to see on TV, like say Tribe Called Quest shooting on Farmers Boulevard, and then me as a
But
kid walking down Farmers Boulevard, like that's the store Fife Dog was standing on the shutter for the video. It just brought, like, the reality was real close to the music. It was so parallel to the true existence of my life. It just made sense. Like, this is what I gotta be. This is what I gotta do. Like, there's no other thing. I can't see nothing else. I gotta breathe this.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that's amazing too, though, because like, what I like about New York, it was like that's where everybody got their style from, and how to dress, how to talk and stuff. Even though the West Coast, was like Jerry curls and plaids and everything you can think of and stuff, but like far as the East Coast, I was always an East Coast hip hop head than I was a West Coast. Don't get me wrong, I love like NWA. Of course, you got Tupac and everybody else, even though he's from New York and stuff, but
Yeah,
I was more so hands on the East Coast, with LL Cool J's, the Rakims, KRS Ones, what I mean, the list goes on and stuff like that. But now for you, you was like rapping, but you also kind of had your foot in the streets a little bit at that time as a kid.
yeah. So it wasn't even like I had my foot in the streets. It was like the streets was there. So even if I went on my way to school, I had to cut through that bad block. if I'm
Right.
playing in this, as soon as I crack my door, you were involved in it. So it wasn't even like I had my foot in the streets. The streets was just so close that it was almost like a trap. And
Wow.
when you really look at it, the way it was all designed and what was going on, especially in the 80s, how authorities would, you know, arrest you, take your money, but then give you all your drugs back and leave you on the block to do it. Like looking back at it, you could see how it was designed for just to absorb and suck us in. And even in the time of my arrest, I was on a basketball scholarship for St. John's University through
Wow.
Transit Tech, and that's how I got my name Spud from Spud Webb because I played
Oh, okay.
ball. So
Yeah, I
even
was going to ask you that too. Yeah.
I played ball. I got my name from Spud Webb. I hated it. Couldn't stand the name. I was like, man, I ain't know Spud Webb. My name is E Dog.
Yeah.
My name is E Dog, but it just stuck. When the nickname hits, is no separating that. But that's what actually happened. Just being so close and net to the streets and how activities happen. A friend of mine's, he got involved into a situation, and me being his friend, I'm like, yo, I'm rolling with you. I'm rolling with you. We out. And that night, two people got shot and one person died. And we were both sentenced to murder. And at the age of 15, I was sentenced to life in prison. Um,
Wow.
at 15.
Wow, man. If that situation didn't happen, what NBA team, you would have loved to play for, during that time?
I was a New York head, so that's even why I wanted to go to St. John's. I didn't want to do law. I knew nothing about law. It was just
Yeah.
so close. It was just so close to the city. I could go to Queens right there, and my dream was to play for the Knicks. But shout out to Mullen, Chris Mullen. A lot of people don't know this, but when I was going through my trial, St. John's University, they actually sent a letter to the courts asking to adopt me, if they were to release me so that way I could play ball because they said I did have a future. They didn't have to do that. We didn't ask them to do that. So I always remember that moment where, they despite what happened, they still were like, nah, like, please, could we have him in our custody? At least let him fight the case in our
Wow.
custody so that way we could continue. So shout out to St. John's on that.
Oh yeah, big shout to him. That's very rare. Especially for a black kid. And to have people believe in you. It is rare because it's sad that with a black man, it's like no matter what we do to redeem ourselves to move forward. They always want to put this latch on our shoulders. Then not only to have our people to attack each other, you got black women attacking us. Like we are the bad guys and stuff. That to have society say, "Hey, y'all, look at this a black guy right here." So
Yeah.
he's about to fuck up this and that, this and that. And it's sad that how that plays, into that, So, like it's like we got to do better when it comes to that. And back then, we didn't really have mentors, at all like that, I'm pretty sure we got some now, but back then, we didn't have social media like that where people
Yeah.
could really get access to learn about life and everything. It was like back then you had two choices: be on the streets, or no, three choices. If you want to, say be a hustler, or you want to go to the army, or you want to play ball.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you
And
know,
speaking of like what you're saying about the role models, the confusing part about that was like some of the role models was the drug dealers. So
wow,
while we going to school, they like, yo, let me don't see you on this block. Here's $50. Take your ass to school. It was confusing because we know what you're doing, but yeah, you giving us gems to stay in school. So now we marveling over you. We really looking at you. We looking up to you like, man, he got the nice car and he's telling me to do right. That it creates a blind error, and that's what happened to me. It created a blind error because school was something I always did. I always went to school, but then the block was always there, and the movers was always there. And then my brothers, I got older brothers who they were in the street. They were in the street,
wow.
so it was very hard to avoid seeing or being a part, or even being placed in that environment. And that's how a lot of us get caught up.
Yeah. When you had like the whole St. John's in your mind while you was there, did it kind of lit a fire? But like, you know what? When I do get an opportunity out, I'm going to turn, everything around and stuff.
From the day of my arrest, like from the day of my it didn't take like, yo, I need to do better. Like it didn't take long to know that's not a place I wanted to
Yeah.
be, right? It didn't take long at all. But what was really troubling for me is like before I went in, my mother passed away the year before.
Oh,
And
well.
so I still was dealing with that. And then I got arrested. And then I'm like, wow, I'm not going to be free. I couldn't fathom the idea of incarceration. I couldn't even think 2 years later. Like I was only 15. So my mind frame was too short. I couldn't even think about that. So now I'm dealing with, the loss of my mother. And that was the first time that I was
Yeah, my
stripped.
condolences.
Thank you, thank you. I was stripped down to myself because when I was home, I could hide. I could hide with my friends. Like I could hide behind the music. I could hide in school. I could hide on the block. I could hide in my living room. Like yeah, I'm hurting, but I could be upright. But when I was in that cell, my brother, with the lights off and the light glaring through the little bars, there was
Right.
no escaping the pain, the sorrow, I'm not gonna be playing basketball. None of that. Everything was stripped down to me. That was the first time that I was like, all right, what am I really going to do? Like, what am
Yeah.
I gonna do? Because I'm here. I'm here. And I never wanted to ever get comfortable in that environment. I watched brothers wake up and they just go play chess and they like, yeah, what up, yo? What we doing? We going to the yard? If anybody know me, man, the first thing I used to do is as soon as I walk out the cell, I used to scream at the top of my lungs. I hate this fucking place. I used to, and they be like, "There's Spud go again," and I was like, "Yo, the day I get comfortable in here, man, is the day you got to keep me. I'm
Wow.
not. I don't want to. I don't want this day. I don't want to wake up a day and not be stressed." They be like, "Yo, you stress too much." If I'm not stressing, then I'm comfortable, man. I don't want to get comfortable, and that was my biggest thing while I was there. People like, "Yo, bro, you got life."
Yeah, because that could drive you crazy, especially in that four-wall cell, man.
It really
And
would.
you missing out on everything, saying that's not there. Like, dang, man, I could be doing this right now. I could be doing that, and stuff. So fast forward up, when you was getting ready to be, released, do you remember the thoughts in your head, at that time?
So there's this saying. I went to 4 parole boards before I got
Okay.
released. So after 7 years, they gave me a hearing to see if they would let me out, and then they said they denied me. So they denied me 3 times, and then I went to my fourth one. So by the time I got to my fourth one, every parole board I used to prepare for it. And I'll go in there and I'll be like, yeah, I'm very remorseful for what happened. A life is very important. And they'll go, oh, we see you went to college while you were in prison and you got your GED. And they would do all that. And I'd be like, yes, studying. And I would do all that stuff. By the time I got to my fourth parole board, and I went in and everybody's like, yo, just play the game, bro. Play the game and say the right things. And I remember they asked me this one question every parole board. And it's, if you could go back in time, would you? And every parole board, I say, yes, if I could go back in time, I would tell my man, listen, nah, we're not going to go out, bro. We're not even going to do that. I'm not going to. And that time when they asked me that, they said, would you change anything? And I said, no. And that was the first time there's 3 commissioners. They all 3 looked up at me like, what? And I said, I wouldn't change nothing. And they was like,
Right.
why would you say that? That your freedoms. And I said, the reason why I'll say that is because what I appreciate and how I appreciate life and myself, I don't know if I would have prior to this. Now, yes, I wish it didn't come to this, but everything that I am of a person today, I wouldn't trade it for nothing. So I was like, yo, y'all gonna hit me, y'all gonna hit me. And I walked up and I left and I was like, they ain't letting me out. And that was the one that they cracked the door. That was the one when I got my letter. You get your letter in the mail 2 days later. And I got the letter and I threw the letter in my locker. I went to the yard, worked out. I'm hearing people like, yo, they hit me again. They not letting me out. And people saying, yo, Spo, what about you? And I'm like, nah, I got hit, bro. I went in there and wilded out. And I went for like a whole week and then read the letter. And then I get a call and they're like, you got to go to transitional services. And I'm like, transitional services? Why? And they was like, yo, you going home? And I was like, don't play with me. They're like, in my head, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to transitional services. It's gonna be a joke. I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna bust this CO's head wide open, and I'm going to the box. And they're gonna play it. And I opened the letter, and it was it was early release, and I was like, oh snap! I'm
Well,
free. I'm a free man. I'm a free man. I was like, yo, I was so excited. I watched a lot of brothers get scared. I saw that fear, like, oh snap, what I'm gonna do. But for me, like I fantasized about freedom for years. I wondered what it was like. I remember a friend. Shout out to my man Guns, right? He was telling a story to me about, the tunnel, the club, the tunnel. Now I'm 15, so I ain't been to club. And he was like, yeah, we
yeah,
had the bottles and we standing on the sofa. And he told this whole miraculous story. And at the end of it, I stopped and I was like, yo, bro, why were you standing on why is a sofa in a club? I was just so blown away. And they all looked at me like, what? So my mind, every time I heard the stories of the town, every time I watched the rap video and the music, I would just sit there and I'm watching every detail, every single thing, the clothes, the movements, everything. So when it was my time to get out, I was just like, I'm ready to move in this. I was excited. I was excited to fail. I was
well,
excited to mess up and scuff my knee and not know what I'm doing. I was excited because it was something that I fantasized so much. So unlike a lot of brothers, when I got out, I was just so eager to mess up and not mess up in a bad way, just eager to figure it out.
yeah. Uh, when you was looking around the city and stuff, I know you was like, damn, man, like I know it been gone for a minute. Everything looks so different. Like the stores right here ain't there no more. The crews and all that ain't there no more. Everybody done got older, everybody came Paris and stuff. And
Yes,
I know it took you a while to adapt to where everything was going on. You was already aware of what was you hearing like on the outside.
it was very hard to adapt. The transition wasn't easy, and what made it really hard, it wasn't even that the world changed. It wasn't even that the world changed, which that was hard. It was really how people dealt with me, knowing my background.
Yeah.
That was the hardest part. It was the people. It was some family members that looked at me like, yeah, that boy did a lot of time. I don't know if he okay. It was a lot of that. It was like how people dealt with me, or when I tried to do something, they remember me as a 15-year-old. Now I'm a grown man, and I'm out here, and they still like, no, 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 we'll take care of that. You just that was the hard part. That was the hard part, and I learned to just, you know what, and I say this to them, to this day. Like I cracked this joke in my head, like I'm gonna shut the fuck up and I'm gonna show you. And I had to do a lot of that. I had to do a lot of just be quiet. Like, okay, I see y'all holding me at a place. You remember me at this place, but you're not taking the time to learn me. And that was the hardest. Like the internet blew my mind. I went in, there was no internet. Everyone had cell phones. I didn't know how to get on a bus. There was tokens. Now there was on Metro cards. I was blown away with Facebook and MySpace. I was like, yo, I could texting. Texting. I remember when I first got the phone and you had to click it 3 times because the alphabets. I was mesmerized by like, yo, I could send a message
Yeah.
and they gonna just get it. I was blown away. So all that was just exciting to me. It was the people. It was people and people's perspective and how they dealt with me. That was hard.
Well, it's crazy too though, because especially when a brother gets out, it's like the first goal, one of the first top goals. Okay, I'm gonna give you, say a job just to start out with and see where it goes from there. You know what I'm saying? And the sad part about, you got these so-called, human resources and the boss and stuff. So they be like, okay, well, when we call you, once you get your background and stuff like that, you're like, please, God, I done went through 20 some jobs. It is sad too because the system keeps failing us and they know it. It's like got these temp services, they will fail the person, just walking into a job, they will fail a person. And my thing like this, it's like, okay, you will hire a person that barely even do their job and stuff. They got no record, but you want to give this brother a chance that's willing, what I'm saying, just
Yeah.
to, be part of a franchise and stuff. Give that brother a chance. I'm not saying that things will happen overnight like that, no, but at least, you know, uh uh take them in because it's like if you go through the same thing, I'm pretty sure you want somebody to hire you in, and that's why I say even to this day that the system got to change because you got restaurants closing down, certain grocery stores closing down,
Yeah,
certain warehouses and everything, and it's sad though because they let their pride. It's like they focus on the title of a record, you
yeah,
know. And they should always use their common sense. It's like you could tell when a person who is serious, who ain't serious. They just need a chance, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
But it's crazy how it is all over the world like that. I say like, what was it like? New York, it's like you get that close of a chance. California, they get you right in. So it's like the closest you could do is like become an Uber driver.
yeah.
It's like that.
So
You know.
so so there was a program called VASA, and if you got out from prison, they would pay for your schooling. And I remember I said I want to go to engineering school, so I went to the school. It was the Audio Institute of Research in the city. I went there. I told them everything about my background, everything. They were just like, "Yo, we love that you want to pursue this. We're gonna turn this $10,000 tuition into five. Then we're gonna get you some grants." So they got me all the way to grants. All I had to pay was $300, right? $300. So I go back to VASA and I'm like, I found the school. You guys don't even gotta put a lot of money into the tuition. I linked them with the school to make it happen. So excited. I go to the meeting at VASA and they're like, listen, we terminated the engineering school. And I was like, what? They
Yeah.
were like, we feel that will be too hard for you. We're gonna put you to get your CDL. We think like driving school buses would be more suitable for you. And I remember like, this is all designed for me to mess up. They want to put me on a school bus, which I've never driven, but I want to go to school for engineering, but they won't do it. And then they just had to pay $300, but they were
Wow.
willing to pay $2,500 for me to drive a bus. It was clear that the things that I wanted to do to progress because of my background, they were just trying to make sure I stay put. I stay in a certain lifestyle or an environment to make sure that there's no growth or I return. To be honest, it was or I return. And once I saw that, I was like, okay, I got to play two games. I got to play the game of me solidifying myself, and I got to play this game to stay out the trap. And that's when I started to really map out how I deal with parole and how I got to deal with myself personally.
Yeah, it is crazy how the system plays like that because, like, they want you, get a job and and do something with yourself. They also want to set you up and try to throw you back in, so that way they get bonuses in their checks. So people don't realize every time when a person gets locked up, male, female, child, whatever, that's a bonus in their check. And it's crazy how that goes. Like they can rebuild you up, they can like knock you down just like that. And that's not good, how the system plays like it, and that's one thing I tell anybody, when you're on parole, probation, whatever, don't even hold a conversation, with the person. Just say, everything is good. You gotta keep it moving up out there.
That's it.
So that way, just count down the days you off probation or whatever, just keep moving because they like that type of stuff, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they know what they're doing, you know what I'm saying? And they be the ones be messing up, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. So it's like, how can you call yourself, protecting the society, but you continue the society going? So yeah, two wrongs don't make it right. Now, I know we spoke on the previous video. So like one of your first jobs, was working at a laundromat. So when you was like working there and stuff like that, you thought to yourself, like, okay, I get an opportunity to fulfill my dreams, something that I've been wanting to do since I was a kid.
Yeah, so when I was working the laundromat, I met a brother named Shark when I was in prison. And everybody in prison is something, does something, knows something. And he was like, yo, listen, I'm in the music industry. I'm a stylist. I got jammed up, but I want to put you on the phone with a person. And the person he put me on the phone was Kurt Burrows at the time. That was, that was
Oh
the
wow.
president of Bad Boy, vice president. And actually, he was the co-owner of Bad Boy. And I said I recited a few songs to him, and he was like, "Yo, when you get out, reach out to me." The brother Shark got out, so when I got out, he was the first person that reached out to me, like, "Yo, okay, you in this town, I'm gonna help you pursue your dream." So me getting the job at the laundromat was one of my ways of making sure that parole didn't bother me. I had a job and it wasn't making that much, but I also had some income. And I ain't gonna lie, I strategically worked out my schedule. So I worked the overnight. And the reason why I worked the overnight, because that would remove my curfew.
Yeah.
Therefore, I could go to the studio on my days off and I ain't got to worry about being out of place. So, I was, that's when like I said, I had to realize how I'm going to work parole and my personal life. So my whole mission was just being an artist, getting a deal. That's all I had in my head. I was like most of these artists. I need to just get rich, get a deal. I'm nice. I could spit. I just need
Yeah.
someone to sign me. And the brother Shark was like, "Yo, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna help you do that. We're gonna get some traction." And we came together and we were like, you know what? We're gonna treat it like the streets. We're gonna treat it like the streets. We're gonna use all the elements that we learned in the streets, hustling, running around, and we're gonna apply it positively. And that's how we moved me. He always referred to me as the product. We gotta bag you up properly and get a stamp.
Right.
And I'm like, what's gonna be my stamp? And he was like, yo, your face. Your face is gonna stamp. And that's why my logo is blurred out on one side and you can see my face. And it signifies the two parts of someone's life, like, your past and your present, what you can't see, what you can see, the good, the bad, the yin yang. And he took this picture of me, made the logo, and that's when we was like, yo, we're gonna spray paint this in front of every record label because we needed to spark some type of interest. And it works. It really worked. We every night he would pick me up after my job and we would go spray paint. And I suggest no one do this. This is vandalism, y'all. But we would spray paint my face in front of every
Wow.
every record label we could find. And Jive was the first ones that, when we came back to spray paint it, there was a note. And it was like, what do you want? Because it says, I want in. And that was a play from the movie King of New York when he was like, I want in, a bag in a park. Go, I want
Okay.
in.
Yeah.
So we did a play on that. Me coming home was like, yo, y'all been playing for a long time. I want in. And that was the play on it. And that play actually got my interest at Jive Record
Wow.
with a A&R Ant Rich.
Oh man, that's dope right there, man. You know what I'm saying? Because when you think to yourself, what's your thoughts? Your mother was back in your mind, like, man, I wish she was here just to see, my growth, where I'm at now as a man and stuff. I know you was thinking to yourself, like, what would she say, during that time and stuff?
You know, I played on that for a long time. A lot of my struggles, I was really I was hard. I was being hard on myself because I was like, damn, I know she would be heartbroken. I know she's heartbroken to see me there. So I was dealing with the concept of me breaking her heart and still dealing with her being lost. So it was
Yeah.
it was it was always like I want to do better. I want to grind. I want to show. And as this might sound callous, but then there was one point in prison where I was sitting there and I was like, nah, I can't do it for her. I can't do it for my father. I can't do it for nobody because then it won't be truthful. I got to do this for me. And that's when a lot of things changed. When I really was like, if I'm not good, how can I make things good for others? I use that phrase like when you go on the airport and they say when disaster strikes and this plane is going down, the oxygen
Yeah.
mask, put your mask on first before you go and try that. They always say it, put your mask on first, secure yourself because you're no good. And that's when I realized, I couldn't just dwell on the what ifs and how it possibly look. I gotta get right. And that was my main focus. Like, I'm just gonna get right. It might not look good to people. People might be like, yo, you bugging, but I gotta be good in my comfort. Like I gotta be able to wake up, look in the mirror and be like, Spud, you did what you gotta do. And be happy with that, regardless of what people
Wow.
feel.
So like from there, you was able to build and brand yourself, as far as a media machine, to get attraction from companies like Def Jam, Sony, Tidal, RCA, as far as like being an artist and then even with the BuzzFeed. So with everything, coming together, how did you conduct yourself, as far as not just, of course as a man, but also to have people take you serious as a businessman during that stage?
When I first was cracking into the business, And what really got me into the business is when I wrote a record and CNBC was interested in it and they used it for a commercial. And I didn't understand sync. And months later, I remember a lawyer at Jive asking me like, "Yo, did you negotiate foreign rights? DVD sales, reruns?" And I was like, "Wait." And when they did the calculation on the amount of money that could have been grossed, it was like 200K.
Wow.
And I was like, "Wow, just in 30 seconds?" Because that's all they used was 30 seconds in this commercial. And that's what introduced me to the concept of business. But one thing that I always wanted to maintain was I never wanted to become that businessman that I hated. Like I came across a lot of professionals in the industry that I look at them and I'm like, I really want to punch you in your face. I so want to punch you in the face, but I'm going to shake your hand. I'm going to tell you have a great day. I never wanted to become that. So I
Yeah.
was really, really big on everywhere I go, letting them know my background. So I started printing up these shirts that said ex-con, real huge on the chest. I still wear them to this day.
Oh well.
Huge ex-con. And I'll go to the meeting. I'll go into the meeting and I wanted to be a representation of my past.
Yeah.
People used to tell me, "Yo, you could say you was in the service. You was a kid when you went in. Nobody knows you now. You a grown man. You could say you moved into town. You was." Oh, and I was like, "No, I'm not saying any of that. I came from prison." And my whole thing was like, "Yeah, I came from prison, but I'm gonna bust y'all ass. Y'all been playing out here. I'm gonna come out here and put in that work. And I'm gonna show y'all that a brother who sat and was dormant and all this, his life is over. I'm gonna work." So every time I was getting those opportunities to do business, my idea was I'm gonna show them double the business because they always was kind of half with me. So they wasn't expecting me to be on my job, and I would make sure that I was on my job. So everywhere I went, I had a detail. I would go right to the internet, Google. I would research. I would read studies. I don't care if you like the Giants. And one of the interviews, one of the sit downs at Sony Records, I was in there and he was going in. The man told me and my partner Sensei, to our face, if
Wow.
you for everything that you just said and how you were, if you were white, I would just hire you right now. You just don't look the part. And right before I walked out, I'm a New Yorker, it's my call, but I look back and I was like, I hope the Giants lose. He called me back. He called me back because I had a detail that I saw in one interview where he said, "Yo, I'll bet everything on the Giants. I love the Giants because of my father." And he went through this whole little detail about the Giants. And I said, "I hope the Giants lose." He called me back and we did business. Now, I could have been prideful. I could have been prideful and been like, "Yo, he said this to my face that if I was white, it would be a different conversation." But I still got back in there. And when I got back in there, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be an employee.
Wow, man, that's real.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not going to be an employee. You want me in here? I'm a consultant. So I'm going to come in here in my sneakers and my hoodie and my chains. I'm coming in here how I am. If you want to do business with me, you're going to take me as I am. And for years, I refused labels, A&R spots. I would just do consulting. And it started to snowball. Shout out to Mass Appeal. Peter
Right.
Benderbighten,
Okay.
he at Mass Appeal, we had a meeting with him and he sent the email out to the industry and he nicknamed me and Sincere, brother I was working with, young smart hustlers. And from there it snowballed. Everybody was like, "Yo, what do y'all do? What do y'all do?" And I was like, "I solve problems." And it took off.
Wow. I tell you, it's amazing though, because like, especially when you represent your, so like you just try to be yourself the right way, and people don't realize, when you bring something different to the table, you able to inspire, the younger generation stuff, especially going through things and stuff like that, and then in the representation, people be like, man, like that's a person that, that's inspiring, let me know that you don't have to go this route, what I'm saying? Like, look where I was at, God gave me a chance, what I'm saying? Because just to even, have not only freedom, but also, be a mentor to those that wants to learn, not the
Yeah,
one that want to be famous so bad, look for attention and that, so like there's no growth in that. It's like you're not gonna get nowhere, faking the funk, you know what I'm saying? And that's the bad part about
yeah,
that.
for real, for real. You can't, and another thing, a lot of people I started to see get into situations like this and then forget about the people, forget about helping, forget about sharing the information or guiding, and that was something that kept me grounded. You know what I'm saying? I was always like, I want to take what I learned and feed the people. Because when I was coming up, there was people who knew, who had the answers, probably had the keys to the doors that I needed to get in, and they just looked at me like, "Yo, figure, pay your dues, pay your dues." And I'm not against paying your dues, but don't throw roadblocks. Don't cement the door that I gotta go through. Let me figure out a way to open the lock. And that was one thing that kept me grounded. Was every time I got further in, the doors that I cut through, I'm always yelling back like, "Yo, the key is under the doormat." I'm always trying to share that information of what I did and how I got there and what's needed to possibly get there.
Yeah, absolutely and stuff. Now, like in 2012, no, 2009, you created Spud Brooklyn, saying which is the branded consultant and also penmanship publishing.
Yes.
So, through your artistry as an artist and stuff like that, like how did you learn, when it came to the publishing and far as branding yourself?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna be solely honest with you. I read a lot. I read a lot, but a lot of what I knew, it was like conversations or things that were said in the
Mhm.
background that my mind held on to. And it was like in those moments, someone will say something, and I'd be like, "No, actually, this is how publishing work." I could never detail completely where my insight for the industry came from. And yeah, I read the everything about the music business. I read publishing books. I read a lot, but there's a lot of things that just in conversations or a meeting or someone say, "Hey, we're trying to get this marketing right and we're confused," and something will trigger, and I'll be like, "Oh, what you got to do is this and this," and they'll be like, "Wow, let's bring you on board." So I'm not even too sure. I think it's a combination of just being a sponge for all these years and hearing conversations or watching movies and hearing like that one line that sticks, and then I could reiterate and understand what that one line means in live action. And that's how I always approach business. I mean, even when I consult for Instagram, I got to sit next to a psychiatrist and a psychologist because they got to give their input. And I remember one of the guys, his name was Dom. Dom looked at me. He was like, "So what school did you go to?" And I was like, "I didn't go to school." He's like, "Wait, you didn't go to school, but so how are you here?" And I was like, "Well, I'm consulting." And he was blown away, like, "Wait, I went to this prestigious school and I've done this." And he's listing off what he did. And
Yeah.
me being me, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I did 13 years in prison." And they like, "What?" So, I've been in those places where sometimes people look at me and they're like, "Yo, where did you get the education to do this?" And I can't really say. It's a combination of just experiencing and reading and guessing. I guess it's a lot of feel. I go with I really follow how I feel in a lot of occasions.
Yeah. So 3 years later, 2012, you created Shoe Studio. Say, of course, you like the title's the engineer, producer, video editor, and podcast. So by that time, add like another notch under your belt. So, and that's one thing about being creative. It's like, we had that mindset, it's like being a barber. It's like, okay, you love cutting hair. You also got other stuff you want to like expand your brand. When
Yeah.
people look at you, people only think about one thing and stuff. So when did that start to steamroll for you to, expand, who you are as a businessman?
When I started to see that there was many different fields for the thing I love, like I love music. But music just doesn't mean being a performer. It means like helping artists, engineering them to get it done, or the business side. And when I saw the playing field for what I love opened up, I was like, oh, I ain't got to just be a rapper. Like I could do a lot more in this space. So that started to deem me creating these extra spaces. And for those that don't know, my studio is called Shoe Studio, SHU. SHU is the box, that's solitary confinement in prison. That's the special housing unit in prison. And I named my studio that because I never
Right.
wanted to forget my journey of when I was in those box. And music was what kept me sane. So music, I always wanted it to be that hub that keeps me grounded. So I named my studio, which is the creative space, Shoe, to remind me of that solitary confinement time where music is what kept me going. So as I'm a free man now, that same sanity I must maintain.
Right. So about like 4 years later, you created Spud Inc. Which you became the director, engineer, film, and audio slash content creator. So
Yes.
by that time, when social media started to get more noticed, because YouTube was already dominating,
Yeah.
but Facebook would start to get more traction. As far as on the business end, then you had Instagram, start to emerge. So around that time, it was like, okay, now I get a chance to really show who Spud Brooklyn even more is as far as like on social media.
So shout out to this girl, Shells. She came to my studio and booked a session. And in my session, I'm like, what we doing? And she said, I'm not doing nothing. I'm just taking pictures. And she was just taking pictures everywhere. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm posting this on Instagram. She was like, yo, you need to get on
Right,
Instagram. And I went on the phone and I looked at Instagram and I jumped out and I saw well, all I saw on Instagram was like, this is a billboard. This is like a billboard instead of Times Square, big on a big bill. This is a worldly billboard that sits on top of the world. You mean I could post something and it'll go all over the world? I was like, oh, I got to get on this. I need that marketing. I need that marketing. And that was the tool. And I stress and yeah, it's superficial and yeah, we know it's beaten down how important or how powerful it is, but that was one tool that actually helped me out in a lot of my business deals, especially with
right,
like even Pluto TV. They reached out because of something they saw on Instagram. They saw me in a building, a billboard building on Instagram and was curious. So I used that a lot in branching what I was doing with Spud Brooklyn and Shoe Studio and also Spud Inc. When that took off in 2016, I was like, I'm gonna use this to show the examples of what's going on so people could see it. And a lot of people think that I was using it to front or style on them, but it was marketing. It was marketing. I was using it and I saw it working.
wow. Yeah, so around this time, you did a company service, for Universal, Sony Music, uh, Good Shepherd Services, Brooklyn Nets, TikTok, BuzzFeed, Pluto, TV, saying the Ruckers, Adidas, and so forth. And, of course, Meta, so, with everything, going on, you thought to yourself, like, wow, like, man, I'm really pretty much, building, not just a resume, but it's also, when you are part of so many, situations, and get your name out there, get a phone call, say, hey, you like to do business with you, connect and stuff, and just to have that access, man. What I mean? I know that's like awesome, man.
Shout out to Miss Jackson. It wasn't until recent. It was only too recent that one day she was talking and she was like, "Yo, do you know how powerful that is?" That I really sat back and I was just sitting there thinking like, "Wow!" Like I've been in some of these offices working with
Right.
some of these people or sitting across. I remember sitting across, you know, engineers or label executives like Clyde Davis. I remember sitting over with Clyde advising, saying something that they should do. I'm talking to Clyde Davis, and in the moment, I'm just proving myself, and I'm showing that I could do it. But it wasn't until moments later, or almost years later, that I sat and I was like, "Wow, I've been in some places." Made some
Right.
friends with some people, and it was wow. It was a big wow for me.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Now, correct me on this one. So you was part of the NBA draft, far as like the photographer and the videographer back in 2021. So how
Yeah.
did that situation, came about?
So I was doing with the studio, I was doing a lot of video work and a lot of content on social media. Everything that you see that I usually post is shot by me or edited by me. I do the whole entire thing. Some people would think I'll have like a slew of team and got a whole bunch of people by a computer. I really don't. And a representative reached out to me. I actually posted a video, a clip of, I forgot what basketball player it was, and I chopped it up as if the basketball player was passing the ball, and then it was a picture of something I was doing in the studio. And they were like, "Yo, who did that?" And I was like, "Me." And they were like, "Do you shoot?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Yo, we want to invite you to the draft to shoot the draft for us." And they had me follow specific candidates that they were drafting, and I would shoot the draft, and I made the reel, and I put the reel out, and they paid me, and I put it under my catalog, and it throws me away because I pull up, I got my one camera, my little light. People up there putting up a whole bunch of lights, and they got 9 different cameras, and they got the different lenses, and I'm in there with a 50 millimeter one lens the whole entire night. And it was really cool that at the end of the night, like even the basketball players and their families were like, "Yo, you just made this experience so cool." Like it wasn't like a cameraman was in there, So those moments like that, just I get marveled, and it's motivating for me to like, yo, I'm moving in the right steps. I got something
Now
going
with
on.
the NYU Tish X billboard, so with the whole Clyde Davis Institute of Music Industry, essentials, being an ambassador, once you get that call about being an ambassador, represent, somebody who's like an icon, brought so much to the table.
So what happened was during the pandemic, I was looking for something to do. We were still creating in the studio. We had our podcast, old school, new school with me and Sincere, but we were figuring out what we could do. And me being a sponge, I was like, "Yo, I'm gonna enroll. I'm gonna enroll for the school." And we enrolled for the school, and they were like, "Oh, it's gonna take this long to do the course. It's gonna, blah blah blah. Some people do it in 3 years, or
Yeah.
and I finished it in 28 days. I
Oh
finished
man.
it, got my certificate in 28 days. And the director reached out to me, was like, "Yo, could you do uh like a sit down, a video conference, a webinar, just sharing your experience as a professional in the class and to our other peers?" And I was like, "Yeah, cool. I'll go on the show." And after the show is when they proposed to me like, "Hey, we want you to be an ambassador to represent for us and speak for us." And I was like, "Cool. I don't got a problem with it. I don't." And I'm really big on, as long as it don't interrupt me.
Yeah.
If something interrupts my peace, my brother, I don't care if it's $1 billion. I am out. Don't call me. I don't want nothing to do with it. If I can't wake up and be comfortable and smile and have a peaceful conversation, if there's any disruption to my peace, I'm deuces. And that was my only concern. If it interrupts my peace, I'm out. So they leave me alone, and they let me work how I want to work, and they don't trouble me.
It's crazy, whenever you have a situation going on, it's always a family member or somebody you knew back in the day, and it's like they will call you on the phone or whatever. He'd be like, "Oh yeah, I see you got this going on." They never say congratulations, man. It's awesome. Never do that. He'd be like, "Hey man, so what's in it for me?" Or they'd be like, "Oh, you think you can give me in that?" Dude, that's what you call hate, just to get you out the way, try to get where they need to be at, And I always say any opportunity you got, it's like don't never block your blessings,
Yeah,
from that. It's just an opportunity for you to block them, you know what I'm saying? Because I tell you, man, like that blocking contact, man, call, man, strong like Facebook and Instagram, man. Just get them out the way, man.
for for real, for real. No, you said something that was really instrumental to a lot of what I and how I move with people reaching out and not even congratulating you. I started to experience that in me early on. I wanted to just help and be a part of everybody. And I had to regain that sense back to like, nah, everybody can't go in this car. Like everybody can't be
Yeah,
on this journey with me. Some people just gotta be, spectators. Some people just gonna be in the stands and probably mad, but they're gonna be in the stands because they don't want to add to. They just want to take.
yeah. Now, like, around 2018, you was a content creator for BuzzFeed, and BuzzFeed is like one like the top trended, companies. When you see BuzzFeed, like you see it on Facebook, you see it on Instagram, especially on Google. It's like you can't miss it. It's
Yeah.
like it's right there with a bunch of stuff you follow on Google and stuff. So how did that situation, came
So
through?
so that stems again from Instagram. They really enjoyed my day. I did this series called Day in My J's, and I started it early on, but I wasn't as consistent as I am now, where I would just film my feet. I would put on a pair of sneakers, one of my favorite sneakers. I would tell the brand, and then I would go on my journey. So I'll go to the bank, the grocery, jump in my car, pick up my kids, and I would just make a reel of my day. And I called it a day in my J's. And they reached out to me saying, like, what's the production company that, helps produce you for that? And I was like, it's just me. I do it. And they were like, well, we got a segment that we would like you to help produce and create. And it was role reversal. They wanted to follow me. I think it was like 2 weeks.
Wow.
2 weeks they followed me, and I would have to conduct myself like if I was like it was the I think 1950s. If it was the 1950s, and how women had to prepare food and hair and face and all the stuff from then. And they followed me for 2 weeks as a parent to see how I would manage in the 1950s. And we produced that bit, and they put it out, and they brought on about like 5 other people that they followed, and we did that. And that was pretty fun and creative. It was different than the type of content that I put in, but again, they let me be natural. It wasn't fake. They let me cut what I felt didn't make any sense, and it worked out.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Uh, did a cavity television of the Emmys photographer. Man, dude, tell you,
Yeah.
man, dude, your resume, man, is unbelievable, man.
Yeah, so
And still be your own boss, when it comes, to those situations, man. That's incredible.
thank you. Yeah, the Emmys, they reached out.
Oh wow.
They reached out directly, and asked me to be a part of, being. It was a scout for photography. They wanted me to work with a group of photographers, but point out to where they wanted the shots, like get that shot, get that shot. And as the day were getting closer, a lot of the photographers were kind of like, "Nah, we don't want that." And they just turned around to me like, "Do you happen to take pictures?" And I was like, yeah, yeah, I do too. I got a camera. And they were like, well, we want to book you to do the photography for the winners of the Oscars.
Wow.
So you will be backstage while they got their trophy, and you just get those shots. And that's what I did. I was there for like 4 hours, and I was back there just getting the shots. And I had to just submit all the shots back to the Emmys, which they told me not to keep any, but I posted some on my website. You can't tell me what to do, man.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Like
You
you
can't
want to
tell
do
me.
again, but you can't keep what produce. I always feel like, like anything you done should be attached to your resume, what I'm saying? That's
And I
crazy,
told
man.
them,
That's
and I verbally told them, I was like, this copy's for you, and this is a copy for me. I will be posting my work on my website. And they just was like, all right, no problem. No problem, man. And I posted some of the work on the website, and they obtained the other copies, and it was a nice transaction. They take too long to pay. I will say that on air. They take forever to pay. But they did. Yeah, it took forever. But they do pay. They do pay. But it was a cool experience. Um and I got asked after that, a lot of fashion shows. During the fashion shows, they were asking.
that's
the,
awesome.
the conflict I was having was a lot of the companies started to just refer to me as a photographer. And I had to balance out, do I want to just take all these jobs because they were paying good, and then change speed, because I didn't want to disregard everything else I built. So a lot of the jobs I was starting to take, then I started to hire a photographer, and I would go with the photographer and he'll work the shot because I realized how it was interrupting the rest of my business. Just because it was good money, I was getting absorbed in that.
Well, I tell you, man, it's incredible, man. Just to be part of, those big situations. It's like a dream that you like fantasize, man, that'd be cool, but I'm doing this to actually happen, man. That's like a level, of like a success and stuff. Look back on like, wow, like these are the bucket lists that I never thought I was gonna be a part of. I had a certain agenda and stuff. You look back like, okay, cool, I gotta go back to that. But beside, had the opportunity to do that. Now, not too long, so like the whole Def Jam being the arts development and scout, how did that situation came about?
It it's funny. I just want to show this right now since you brought that up. As we speak, Def Jam Def Jam's calling me right now,
Oh
trying to
wow.
trying to work. It's funny. What happened with that was I was producing a podcast called Lipstick and Liquor Bottles here in the studio. A young lady named Poison Ivory, who was part of, I believe it was the Bad Girls Club, the original Bad Girls Club.
Okay.
She was doing a podcast. She was looking for a place. I got introduced for her. We started shooting it here in the studio. That was my first take on like running 3 mics and running it through the internet and their website, and they were bringing in guests and hosts and stuff. And there was a guest there named Mozzie. Shout out to Mozzie. He got interviewed, and then after the interview, he wanted to be a guest. They wanted to have him as a guest host. And initially, I was against it. I was like, "It's an all girls thing. Let's have all girls host the show." But then when I met him in the club and we were talking, I was like, "Yo, this dude Mozzie is super cool." So we did the show for like three seasons, short seasons, like 8 episodes a season,
Oh wow.
and then it fizzled out. And then one day he called me and he was like, "Yo, we're looking to sign an artist that sounds like Lauryn Hill, could sing and rap, but we want to do the writing for her. Do you know anybody?" And Sincere met a girl in Empanada Mama, and he happened to just tell me about it. Now I don't know her. I said, "Yo, that girl you met Empanada, because she sing." He said, "Yes." I said, "We got a meeting on Wednesday at Def Jam. Bring her to the studio." He brought her to the studio on Monday. We broke the ice and met each other. Tuesday, Sincere wrote some lyrics. I arranged it, recorded her, mixed it. Wednesday, we walked it into the building, and it was a go. They signed it from right there,
Wow.
and
Man,
that
that's
was
crazy. You
that
know,
was that was my introduction to Def Jam.
oh wow. Speaking of Bad Girls Club, yeah, this is a true story. I was leaving my auntie's house and stuff, and she had like a birthday and stuff like that. And so I stopped at a store, I was getting gas, get something to drink. So right next door there was a bar. And these group of, sisters, coming out say, hey, hi handsome and stuff, like we for the Bad Girls Club. And I turned to look, I said, it was back in 2013. I said, man, but hey man, like ain't nobody looking at y'all tired ass, man. Go on, bro, that shit. You know what I'm saying? Cause I mean, like as a grown man, like you ain't about to fool me with that. Like I don't give a damn how you look and stuff,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
straight
So,
up, straight
and
up.
then man, the look on their face saying, man, you motherfucker, this and that and stuff. But it's crazy, how that happens. Now a big shout out to V. She said, have you ever thought about writing a book?
Yes, so I really did. I started doing an audio book. The problem with the book in the beginning, because everybody used to ask me, especially after my prison sentence. The problem with every time I start the book, something new happens, and I'm like, okay, I can't start it now because the journey is still going, and it's like
Wow.
as the moments keep going, something new pops up, and I was like, damn, if I'd have wrote the book, I would have been missing. So I just got to buckle down and have the book down. But I did start an audio book. Well, not an audio book. I was recording chapters and then going back to have them rewritten. Again, shout out to Miss Groves who was typing that out for me because I felt like time was killing me. Like it's my days be busy. Like
Oh
I'm
man.
zigzagging a whole lot throughout my days, so it was kind of hard to sit down and pen the book. You know what I mean? But I've been working.
Yeah.
I've been working on it. I've been working on it. There was There was a situation. I guess I could talk about it. There was no NDA. A producer at Netflix a few years ago wanted to try to get it. No, Hulu. Excuse me, Hulu wanted to sit down and pen something out and write the story and the likeness, but that didn't fizzle out too much of anything to fruition as of yet. But that was a conversation had a few years ago.
Oh wow, man, that could have it's worked. Who knows and stuff. Now, like, so in between the Def Jam situation, you was an A&R for RCA.
Yeah, so we was doing A&R consultant. So what started happening was a lot of the head executives are me and Sincere's name. It was coming around a lot. These guys is coming, and I had this 24-hour rule. If me and you sit down and we have a business meeting, and you pitch something to me, or say, "Listen, Spud, I'm trying to get so and so, and we trying to get a deal." My job was in 24 hours. I wanted it done,
Wow.
and that's what
Oh,
helped me. That's what helped boost my name in the industry because I would always come through. So executives at other companies, and I used social media a lot. So no artist usually supposed to film inside of a record label. That's why you don't really see artists taking pictures in record labels. They tell you filming here, you banned. Every record label I've been to, I filmed, I took pictures, I did videos, and then when I did, I posted it. I even shot a music video using the clips of all the record labels I've went into. And what
wow.
I was doing was I would tag the label, and people would think, "Oh, hey, he fronting again." No, I was tagging the label because I'm trying to get the interest of the business. And sure enough, Sony would see what I'm doing at Universal, and then an executive would reach out and be like, "Yo, what you got? What's going on over there? Are you?" No, I'm not. No, I'm consulting. And me and Sincere were probably the only music consultants in the music industry that were able to go to Universal and Sony in the same day and consult for them, and they trusted that we didn't expose what was going on both sides, and it just kept snowballing. When one would come, they'd be like, "Yo, there's something going on over here at Epic," and all right, set up the meeting, and we'll go to Epic to hear what they got, and then we started to shop a lot of artists, and then started working with them on what they had, whether it was their artists that they have, looking over contracts, and trying to figure out if they want to make deals and so forth.
Wow, but that's awesome, man. Uh, what he said, what about a biopic or a documentary? Now, if you did a biopic, who could you see play you? As far as a child, even as an adult.
I don't even know. I don't even know, or really don't know. That's a hard one. That's a hard
Yeah.
one. I'm not too sure on the biopic, but the documentary was something that I started to do with a guy. He was tied in with Rutgers University, and I don't know what happened, but that fizzled out. We were recording, we were filming, and then it just totally fizzled out. And
Wow.
I just kept pumping. I just kept pumping. But I've been really thinking about the documentary, shooting like my own idea and getting perspectives from the people around me about me, instead of me telling the story from my lens, kind of just telling the story from everybody else's lens and their encounter. So that is something that I've been thinking of a lot lately.
Yeah. For when you reflect on life, what kind of thoughts come you mind to be like where you was, coming up to go through the shenanigans you did to where you are now, in 2025.
This was probably about 6 or 7 months ago when I really reflect. And my brother, I cried. And I cried because I cried for the younger me. I could not, me right now, could not believe what the younger me went through. Now, when I was going through it, I had to thug it out. It was happening in live time, and you
Right.
you got you got to just figure it out. And some things I figured out quick, some things I had to bump my head and figure out. But you had to figure it out. But now, looking back right now, again, like 7 months ago, I really looked back and I was like, wow, like it's insane. And I cried. I got emotional, and that was kind of like the first time I got emotional, not just because of my pain or my stress or I'm locked out, or I miss my family. Like I really looked at me as if the younger version of me was not me. And
Yeah.
it was emotional. Like, I can't believe that young man went through all
Wow.
that. I couldn't, and I went through it, and I couldn't believe, looking at, reflecting, like, how in the world did you do it? Like I asked myself that, like, how did you do it? Like, I know you was full of anger and full of, but yo, how did you do it? So it gave, like, now in this day and age, it gives me a different appreciation for the errors and the mistakes that I made, and the things that I got right. I got a total different appreciation for it. And the flip side of that is, when I'm talking to these young kids, or I'm in the colleges, I'm looking at, and I'm sharing to them, like, yo, the world is at your hands. Like, if I could come out after 13 years, no work history, people don't realize there was a moment in my life that I spent 100% of my adulthood in prison. Until I was released, my whole adulthood, 100% of it was in prison. If I could come home with
Wow.
that, if I could do, I tell these kids in school, like, yo, you got the world at your hands. So I still try to find ways to use that story to intensify the possibilities of the younger generation, or not even just the younger generation, anyone in pursuit for something. Like, the possibility is real. It's real. Some of the stuff that I'm doing, I don't even realize how wow that is. Like, yo, you've done what? Because all I know was the bottom. All I know was, so everything that I'm doing is a up. So for me, it's not a wow. It's okay. What's next? I gotta keep going, because I've been on the low for so long in my life. I gotta keep going. So being with that, I just try to share with people, like, yo, it's all possible, man. Look at me, man. Look at me. If you want to buckle it down, and not just saying I'm an ex-con, but if you want to buckle it down to just a rap sheet, like, I was a 15-year-old kid with just a rap sheet. When
Yeah.
I came out at 28 with absolutely nothing. One pair of sneakers. I always crack the joke. One pair of sneakers, two jeans, and a hoodie. And that's it. That's it. And I had a bright dream of, like, experiencing life. That was it. I just wanted to experience life.
Yeah, man, and stuff. Yeah, before we wrap it up, anybody want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, first and foremost, man, I want to give a shout out to you and V, most
Yeah,
definitely,
appreciate it.
for just not just for me, but including me, just giving the platforms for a lot of people and their voices to be heard, and introducing things that already exist to an audience, and also having those things that introduce to audience, parallel to the life. So I want to shout you out, most definitely. I want to shout out Miss Jackson. She's always, I cracked a joke earlier today, like, she put that fire. She has, and I'm gonna say it, and she gonna die laughing. She has the perfect level of annoyance. When I was coming up in the music business, an executive told me, like, yo, in this business, you got to have the perfect level of annoyance, because he felt I was too humble and respectful. When I heard a no, I used to be like, all right, cool, I'm out. And I ain't never know what he meant by that until I met Miss Jackson, and I was like, this is what he meant, bro. You got the perfect level of annoyance. But I want to send a shout out to Miss Jackson. And I want to send a shout out to everybody who played a part in my life, man. Like, on this journey, like the Miss Groves, Eve, Lee, my man Shark, who he didn't have to embrace me when I got out and put me on this road, because Shark was what introduced me to the road to my dreams. Because before, it was just a dream, but when I met Shark, the realism of it was getting introduced, because he was taking me to the Wu-Tang Mansion, and he was bringing me to 50 Cent, and he was really trying to get me that deal. So that was the introduction of making my dreams, like, it was reachable. I saw it, like, even though I wasn't able to touch it, like, it wasn't in my head no more. I was seeing it with my eyes, like, yo, it's right there. So shout out to those, man. And I want to give a super shout out, the biggest shout out, to everybody who told me no, everybody who said, I'm a failure, because that did ignite a certain level. It ignited the anger in a
Wow.
positive form to keep me going. It kept me up at night. It rang echoes in my head. And the good and the bad all is part of my journey. So I want to send a shout out to all that, man.
Yeah, man. And man, I tell you, man, I appreciate you, just knowing your story, man. Because in my mind, I say, I bet you would have got a great resume, man. I had a feeling, I just felt it in my spirit, you know what I'm saying? Just to read your story, man, then, to hear you talk, about, all your different experiences and stuff like that. I said, wow, man, this brother here, man, definitely got a story, that needs to be told publicly, say out to the world, and I always say that that God knows our story before we even thought of.
Yeah,
He know what time when a person should come together, regardless how things go between them two. God knows what time for you to be born. He knows that it's gonna start out good, it's gonna start out up and down, and to where you are now and stuff. And I always say that we're here for a reason, not for a season. And I
yeah,
wish that majority of people that actually knew that, not all the ones who like can't see no further in life, depression and everything else and stuff, and God, uses makes us as warriors, not as losers, you know what I'm saying? And stuff, and so with that being said, big shouts to Miss V for
yes.
connecting this situation, making it happen. The big shouts to Miss Jackson of MJMG Presents. Big shouts to everybody that dropped comments on there, and loving what's going on here. So with that being said, make sure you guys follow this brother here, Spud Brooklyn, saying, on all social media outlets. This brother right here is the truth, saying when he interviewed me, hey, I mean, it was a classic, I mean, it's one thing, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, that's cool, but for me, it ain't enough, I mean, 29 years in this game, I gotta tell my story, but also drop some gems. That's important and stuff, you know what I'm
Most
saying?
definite.
So,
Most definite. Thank
well,
you, my
definitely,
brother.
man.
Thank you.
Man, so with that being said, we are out of here. Peace.
Peace.